Welcome to the Emotional Balance Sheet, the go-to podcast for parents with multiple kids, especially those with twins, triplets, or more, who are navigating the maze of modern family life and personal finance. Whether you're overwhelmed by education or retirement planning, parenting dilemmas, career transitions, or trying to define your purpose and plan, we're here to guide you with empathy, encouragement, and expertise. Hosted by Paul Fenner, founder of Tama Capital, a certified financial planner and parent to 4 kids, including a set of triplets. Our podcast is your ally in the quest for financial peace of mind, proving that money matters, but family comes first. Subscribe now and join our community of empowered parents at tamacapital.com. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Tama may retain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
What does comprehensive financial planning even mean? At Tama Capital, it means a family office where lifestyle planning such as retirement, college, portfolio management, and tax prep and planning are all under one umbrella. But it goes beyond numbers. We focus as much on the emotional side of financial planning as we do on the financial side. We get you. We understand your challenges of building a family, business or career, and a healthy life. We are devoted to wealth planning for families like yours because we are you. Learn how our family can help your family by visiting tamacapital.com. Hi, and welcome back. When I say the word productive or productivity, what's the first thing that you think of? Is it being efficient, getting things done, being overwhelmed? I'm putting this in the context of a conversation I had recently at a graduation party with one of my clients. And we got on this topic of being productive, but not in the sense of what you would normally think. We're actually talking about our kids. And to be honest, we were kind of lamenting about some of the frustrations we were having about our kids doing things. And it was interesting. The client, I'll call him Gabe, said, we just want our kids to be productive members of society. And he kind of said it with a straight face. And knowing him, I knew he was being serious. But what his point was is that it doesn't matter like what his kids did, whether they were involved in sports or community or had a job. Their main driver to seeing their kids being productive was doing something. And I thought that was really fascinating because as I've often struggled in this world of parenting with my triplets plus one. I have this unique challenge, as most parents do, whether you have 4 kids or 2 kids or even 1 kid, that I find that in my case, I have 2 that are what I would call intrinsically motivated and 2 that are not. So what do I mean by that? My 2 kids that are motivated, they're just naturally driven. They're naturally driven to focus on one or more things that they're really interested in. Like they've kind of found their niche. The other one likes to do just about anything and everything. It's hard to tell her no because she asks about doing so many things and being involved in so many different activities. And then I have 2 that are kind of just floating along. And in my mind, these kids are no different than adults. Like trying to figure out, okay, what can I do to help motivate you to find your thing? And in financial planning terms, I liken this back to working with newer families and even families I've worked with for, years and years and decades almost, is helping them find their purpose. What are their supporting objectives? These things are things I've talked about on the podcast for years. But, having this conversation with Gabe, it got me thinking about how productivity can take on a different meaning. Like when he was talking about his kids and making sure that they were involved in something to be productive. And I think it really hits home right now. I mean, I'm recording this in the middle of the summer, and we all know that I think teachers call it the summer brain drain, where kids are out of school and they just lose touch. And it's a real thing. And so you've heard the adage, if your kids active kids stay out of active trouble. And I think there's some truth to that. But then there's also the other end of the spectrum where we can overschedule our kids. That's a really big deal. And when I back up and I think about, okay, there's a good and a bad to this having productive kids. I think the good is they are learning and developing new skills that they wouldn't necessarily get on their own. I think of my girls and their swimming. But then there's the flip side where they could be driven too much. Like their whole life is centered around that, and it causes increased anxiety. I've seen that happen before. There's also the monetary cost. I've worked with plenty of families whose purpose and objective is to help support their kids in their endeavors, whether it's sports or theater, you name it. There's a cost to all that these days. And I think kids sports, per Derek Thompson of The Atlantic, is a multi-billion-dollar industry. But then I struggle with the other part of that, maybe the bad part of that, where I feel like if I'm not helping my kids to their intrinsic motivation, their purpose, like I'm failing them in some kind of way. And that I haven't quite figured out. Like how can I help my kids find that motivation to want to be productive, not forcing it on them. But sometimes as parents, that's what we have to do. We have to give them, here are your options, A, B, maybe even C, and they don't like any of them, but you got to do one of three things. Like going back to Gabe's point, you have to be in an activity, athletics, theater, or something in the community, or have a job. You just can't sit around. And I think, like most things, I bring a lot of questions to these conversations, more so than I do answers. And so I always look for feedback from you, the audience, on what works well for you, what works well from a parenting standpoint to help make your kids productive, help make your kids intrinsically motivated and successful. If you've enjoyed this conversation, could you do me a favor? Do you know anyone else who would enjoy these types of conversations where we talk about the intersections of our emotional and financial lives? Because if you do, it's actually going to help both of us. Could you share this conversation with someone? They will think you're great because you just gave them this terrific podcast, and it helps me grow my audience. Or you can tell them to go to tamacapital.com. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.